Sometimes God prepares you for something your entire life. This is the story of a woman who discovered that her greatest failure was actually God's way of placing her exactly where she was meant to be. Gertrude was 66 years old and had spent nearly her entire life afraid and holding back from things. It was the kind of fear that never shows its face or says its name. It just got in the way of every decision she made. Not afraid of storms, not afraid of getting old. She was afraid of herself, afraid that the voices in her head would come true, afraid that she wasn't enough, that she never would be. In the small town of Millfield, Ohio, her little house on Birch Lane just sat there, forgotten-like, at the end of a street where everyone knew everyone and neighborhood bonds ran deep. The porch swing creaked in the October wind, as if it were waiting for someone to sit down. Inside, a half-drunk cup of coffee sat on the kitchen table, gone cold hours ago. Gertrude hadn't even touched it. She was staring at the wall, eyes open, but her mind somewhere else, reliving a memory she'd replayed 10,000 times before. She was 8 years old. Her father, a factory worker with steel dust permanently caked under his fingernails, was standing in the kitchen doorway. He was holding her notebook, the notebook her teacher, Mrs. Callahan, had praised that afternoon. "Gertrude has a real talent for writing," the teacher had said. Those words had lit a fire in the little girl's chest. For the first time, she felt like someone actually saw her. Her father threw the notebook in the trash without even opening it. "There's no room for dreamers in this family." That fire went out. It never came back. Every chance she got, she pulled back. She pulled back so quietly that nobody noticed. Not even her. The college application she never sent. The one she sealed in an envelope, kept in a drawer for a week, and then ripped up. The newspaper job listing she stared at before crumpling it up and throwing it away. The theater group at Grace Fellowship Church that she watched from the parking lot but never walked into. Every time, the same voice. "You can't do this. Who do you think you are?" She married Harold. He was a good man, quiet. He ran the hardware store on 5th Street for 31 years, his hands always carrying a faint smell of machine oil. They had a son named Tyler, who grew up and moved to Denver. Harold passed away 8 years ago. One November morning, while pouring his second cup of coffee, his heart stopped before the cup even reached the counter. No warning, no goodbye. After that, Gertrude's world shrank to the size of her living room. 4 walls, 1 window, that's it. A pension check, Social Security, the TV on from morning to night because after a while the silence got too heavy. In the silence, Harold's absence made itself painfully obvious. She went to Grace Fellowship every Sunday. It took her 10 minutes just to put her shoes on now. She sat in the back. She listened. She left. She didn't talk to anyone. Tyler called once a year, usually on holidays, and even those calls were short. Very rarely it was twice a year. "How are you, Mom?" But his voice always sounded cold and distant. She always said, "I'm fine, sweetie." But her feelings were real. She held the phone with both hands, clenching her jaw so her voice wouldn't shake. She was never fine. Then one Tuesday, she saw a flyer at the grocery store. The Millfield Community Center needed volunteers for a reading program, for elderly residents who could no longer read on their own. People with tired eyes, trembling hands, people starving for stories. Something stirred in her chest. That old, almost forgotten stirring. Before she could talk herself out of it for once, she tore off a phone number. Next thing she knew, she was signed up. They paired her with Mr. Arthur Patterson, 80 years old, nearly blind, sitting in his wheelchair by the window. She was supposed to read him a chapter about the Ohio River Valley. Simple enough, really. But on the very first sentence, her voice cracked. The words got tangled up. Her hands were shaking so badly you could hear the pages rustling. Mr. Patterson looked toward her in surprise. He couldn't see, but he felt it. Felt that something was wrong. Gertrude's chest tightened. She closed the book, mumbled an apology, and walked out. That night, she cried harder than she had in years, burying her face in Harold's pillow. "I can't do anything right," she whispered. "My father was right." Then she screamed. At the ceiling, at God, at the silence. pouring out everything that had been knotted in her throat for 60 years. If you put something inside me, why didn't you let me use it? Why did you give me a voice and then let someone take it away? No answer came, and she wasn't expecting one anyway. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. A week later, the phone rang. Martha from the community center. Gertrude, Mr. Patterson is asking about you. He said you were the only person who smiled at him all month. Gertrude nearly dropped the phone from shock and excitement. He actually wants me back. I couldn't even finish a page. Honey, Martha said gently, he doesn't need a perfect reader. He needs someone to show up. She went back, the very next Tuesday, through the same door, but this time, not to run. Her hands were still shaking. Her voice was still unsteady. But she didn't run. She read slowly, stumbling here and there, and Mr. Patterson sat with his eyes closed and listened. When she finished, he smiled. A real smile. That was lovely. Same time next week? Same time next week turned into every week. Before she even realized it had become a ritual. One person became two. Two became five. Gertrude wasn't just reading anymore. She was listening, maybe truly listening for the first time in her life. These people were telling her their stories, and she started putting them down on paper. She and Mr. Patterson even wrote a letter to his grandson who hadn't visited in years, every sentence heavy with longing. A birthday note for Mrs. Kowalski's grandchild. She slipped in a corny little joke, and Mrs. Kowalski laughed through her tears. A memoir piece for a retired teacher who wanted her former students to know she still thought about them. She was writing again, not for herself, for people who needed someone to carry their words. One afternoon, Mr. Patterson said something that stopped her in her tracks. You know, my daughter hasn't come to see me in 4 years. Last time she came, she didn't even step past the door. But you come every week. Your voice gives me something to hold on to. Gertrude's eyes filled up. But this time it wasn't from embarrassment. She looked at this man in his wheelchair and realized that those unseeing eyes saw her, and the whole picture changed. Every year she'd felt like she wasn't enough. Every door she never walked through. Every moment she believed that voice in her head telling her she'd fail. It was all as if it had been preparing her for this room, these people, this moment. She didn't need to be perfect. She never had. She needed to know what it felt like to be worthless, so that when she sat down next to someone carrying the same weight and said, "You matter," she truly meant it. She needed to taste failure, so she could look someone in the eye, see her own reflection, and say, "This doesn't define you." Researchers call this the wounded healer principle. Our deepest struggles become our most authentic source of compassion. Studies consistently show that people who have walked through personal hardship connect with others at a level that untested confidence can never reach. Because scars speak a common language. Gertrude didn't know the research. She usually just did whatever made sense. She just knew this made sense. For 30 years, she had asked God, asked every night like she was talking to the same wall, "Why won't you give me courage?" But God wasn't withholding courage from you. It was all as if it had been preparing her for this room, these people, this moment. She didn't need to be perfect. She never had. She needed to know what it felt like to be worthless, so that when she sat down next to someone carrying the same weight and said, "You matter," she truly meant it. She needed to taste failure, so she could look someone in the eye, see her own reflection, and say, "This doesn't define you." Researchers call this the wounded healer principle. Our deepest struggles become our most authentic source of compassion. Studies consistently show that people who have walked through personal hardship connect with others at a level that untested confidence can never reach. Because scars speak a common language. Gertrude didn't know the research. She usually just did whatever made sense. She just knew this made sense. For 30 years, she had asked God, asked every night like she was talking to the same wall, "Why won't you give me courage?" But God wasn't withholding courage from you. He was doing something far more delicate and detailed. He let her break, because only a broken person can truly understand or empathize with another broken person. She started a small writing circle at the community center. She pulled chairs around a table, set a thermos of tea in the middle. 8 people, every Thursday, telling their stories. Sometimes laughing, sometimes sitting in silence. And Gertrude turned them into letters and memoirs their families would keep forever. Tyler flew in from Denver that Christmas, for the first time in 3 years. He sat in the back and asked his mom to read a piece she'd written for Mr. Patterson's family. When she finished, Tyler was crying, hand over his mouth, crying silently. "Mom, I didn't know you could do this," she smiled. For the first time in 60 years, a smile without shame. "Neither did I, sweetie." Maybe you're asking yourself the same question right now. Why do I always fall short? Why does God leave me alone with this fear? But what if He's preparing you for something you can't see yet? The way He prepared Gertrude? Quietly? Painfully? What if feeling like you're not enough is His workshop, shaping you into exactly the person someone else desperately needs? Say these 5 words today, even if you don't understand them yet. God, use my brokenness. Because the cracks in your life aren't where the light escapes. They're where it finally gets in. And through you, that light reaches someone sitting in the dark. Maybe in a wheelchair, maybe at an empty kitchen table. Someone waiting for exactly the person you are. Someone waiting for exactly the person you are. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs courage today. Maybe when they read your message, they'll feel what Gertrude felt. Tell us, have you ever had a moment where your greatest struggle turned into your greatest purpose? See you in the next story. Until then, stop trying to be perfect. Gertrude did. Her hands were shaking, but she still did. Start showing up. God uses broken vessels.